Hi, everybody. Welcome. Just getting a little bit set up here. So if you could do me a favor in the meantime and let me know when you're taking the LSAT and whether you've taken it before, just use the chat function here. And that will help me orient this conversation best to your needs. So do me a favor again, just type in the chat window when you're taking the LSAT, and I'll orient this conversation around that. The June LSAT, of course, is just a few days away. And then we have July in about 6-7 weeks. Then we also have LSATs in the fall. But of course, I have different advice based on your particular study timeline. So do me a favor, type in the chat when you're taking it, and I'll orient the conversation around your needs and questions. I see some folks are taking it in July. So we got 2 Julys, 1 June, 1 person taking it in July and September, 1 person taking it in June and July. Awesome. So we've got a good spread here. So what I'll do then is I will speak a little bit about June and what to do in these final few days. Then I'll talk about how to study over the next few weeks, or 6 to 7 weeks for July. And then I'll finally end off with talking about longer timelines, September, October, November, and the fall. So right now, the June LSAT is only about 3 days away, I think, Saturday, Sunday, but yes, 3 days. So at this point, this is not the time to learn anything new. It's not the time to try anything new. I'd recommend instead simply staying fresh. Stay fresh, focus on refining whatever you've done up to this point, maybe another full-length timed exam, 1 timed exam, that's it. Maybe Saturday, maybe actually really at this point, just Saturday, that's it. Sunday, you want to take the day off, then Monday, go in and kill it. I was talking with a student earlier who has accommodations and is taking it on Tuesday. And so for that student, Sunday, taking an exam on Sunday could be okay, but I wouldn't do anything the day before. Day before, totally just rest, relax, take it easy, walk in Monday and destroy the exam, walk in confident, feeling good. So again, tomorrow, Saturday, is the last day I would recommend taking a full-length timed exam. And so if your worst nightmare is 2 logic game sections back-to-back, 2 reading comps back-to-back, or 3 logical reasonings back-to-back, if that's your worst nightmare, then maybe do that. But if you're taking a full-length timed exam, think about why you're taking it and what you hope to get out of the experience. Is that you want to work on your endurance? Do you want to work on your pacing? Do you want to have just another great score under your belt so you walk in feeling confident? But let's say if your goal is a 170 and your last practice test was a 170 or above, or even a 169, maybe you want to just leave it where it was, not go beyond that, and walk into Monday feeling good with what you've done up to this point. The value in taking a timed exam usually is not simply to measure yourself. It really is a lot more about simply getting a sense of your weak areas, where to review and work on your pacing. But if you're already good on that, there's no need to do anything else more than that. Here in New York, at least, the weather's supposed to be pretty nice tomorrow. I'd say go out and enjoy it. It's pretty nice today. Go out and enjoy it. You've studied all you can up to this point. 1 more day is not going to give you some earth-shattering insight, most likely. Better to stay fresh and just feel good, feeling relaxed. As one person said, staycation Sunday, take it easy. No studying at all, just walk in Monday. And you know what? If you feel like you have a ton of studying more to do and you have a lot more full-length timed exams to do, and you feel like all your studying up to this point for June was just not enough and it's all woulda, coulda, shoulda, but you didn't, then maybe it's time, you know what? You can withdraw from June and go for July instead. And the July LSAT is kind of interesting because first off, you can see your score before you decide whether to cancel, which could remove some of the anxiety around taking that test. And if you do cancel, you will get a free retake on a future LSAT administration. So you could take it in October, November, January, March, or April of next year for free. So July is nice for that reason. I think a lot of admission officers will be expecting folks to take July and cancel because LSAC has made that option available. So they will see an inordinate spike in the number of people taking July LSATs and canceling. And so if you cancel on that test date, it probably won't be a huge red flag. You do want to consider, of course, that if you cancel in July, then you cancel in September, and then another time that 3 cancels starts to look a little bit shaky, like maybe you don't know when you're ready to take it. But as long as you can avoid a pattern, that's okay. The other thing you want to know about July is that it's a transitional period where half of students are getting the digital format on the tablet, half are getting the paper and pencil format. LSAC chooses for you, and you don't get any advance notice. So keep that in mind. You've got to be ready for both paper and digital if you're taking it in July. And then, of course, September will be fully digital. If you want to know what the digital LSAT looks like, LSAC has released a familiarization tool on their website at familiar.lsac.org. And I will walk through that with you a little bit now just so you can see what it's like. Once again, the link here is familiar.lsac.org. So I will throw that link in the chat if you want to see on your end, but I'm going to screen share it for you here as well. So familiar.lsac.org, they've released 3 practice tests, 71, 73, and 74. And there will be more than that in the lead up to the fall. So we could take a look at, for example, logic games, what that looks like. You see we have a game here. We have the rules. We have one question, only one question at a time. So one thing you want to get used to is seeing only one question at a time and nothing beyond that. That will be the case for all digital LSATs. Of course, they won't have reveal answer as a function on the real thing when you take it on and test it. That's just to let you see it at the moment, which I actually think you shouldn't use if you're taking this as a full-length section or exam, because you don't want to get used to that instant feedback. You want to delay that gratification up until the end of the section or the end of the exam. Now, some features they have here. You can underline things. You can highlight things in 3 different colors, yellow, pink, and orange. You can erase what you've highlighted. You can increase or decrease the text size. There we go. You can make it smaller if you want. You can increase the line spacing if you want to spread it out more. You can also modify the brightness, but that doesn't work on the computer, only on tablet. And there also is this countdown clock on the upper right here that you can remove by clicking it. But once the 5-minute warning hits, you can no longer remove it. So it's something to get used to. You can flag questions. You see I put a flag on number 2. There's a little flag icon popping up on the bottom. If I select an answer, it's selected on bottom. If I eliminate an answer, then it's faded to gray there, which is nice. So you won't pay as much attention to it. Let's see what else. Going back to the directions, let's say we were starting the section from the beginning. The directions pop up. The timer starts counting down immediately. You don't get to click, read the directions, then click go to questions, then the timer starts. The timer starts immediately, so don't take a breather during this part or actually read the rules, because of course the rules are always the same. You should immediately go on to the questions and start, because the clock has been ticking this entire time. Games, one question at a time, of course. So you have to click around if you want to see the other questions and go back if you need to. But for reading comp, you have to scroll down through to see the entire passage. You can't see the entire passage at a glance and see a question at the same time. In fact, you click passage only, you still see only 2 out of 3 pages on the screen at once. You can't see all 3 at the same time. That is something to get used to. You can underline, you can highlight, you can underline. There are no longer any line numbers to the side here, and the questions will not refer to line numbers because there aren't any. So you'll see here that what they do instead is let me see if I can find, yes, here they highlight things, and you can see that when we're on number 8, the relevant phrase skinning animals is highlighted down here as well, and fish pulled from the ocean is highlighted on both the passage and the question. They've used that as a replacement for the line reference. But once again, you can only see one question at a time, and you cannot see the entire passage and one question at the same time. So this is something that you will want to get used to, and you can't even see all the questions at once. You have to scroll up and down as well, all the choices as well. You have to scroll up and down. You can collapse choices if they are taking up more than one entire field at once, taking up more than the single screen can hold at once. So that is nice. And so maybe let's say if you had eliminated choice B, you might want to collapse that since it's no longer relevant to you, given that you have eliminated it. If you bubble for, let's say you bubble A, the bubbling will pop up here, but it won't tell you what you bubbled on the navigation bar at the bottom here. So if you have made an inordinate number of A's, if you have chosen A more often than you otherwise would have expected, you can't see at a glance, oh, I should choose D or E for the remaining ones. So you have to kind of scroll around or click around back and forth if you want to get a sense of that. Of course, I wouldn't focus on it too much, but it is something to think about. Now, how should you use these various tools? I think, honestly, they're not that useful, and I wouldn't really spend much time dealing with the underlining or the highlighting, because I just don't think they don't do a whole lot for you. if you wanted to, you could use the highlighter to maybe separate out the evidence from the conclusion. So if this is where the split is, maybe you could highlight that little period. If I can get it right here, the tool's kind of laggy on the computer at the moment for some reason. But basically, I would highlight the separation between evidence and conclusion to show that demarcation, because you cannot draw freehand on the screen. You can't draw with a pen, for example, the way that you might be able to on a whiteboard. So that would be something to get used to. Let's say if I wanted to draw a sketch here and draw something along those lines, you can't do similar on the digital LSAT specifically. You can only use their particular tools. So something to get used to, something to be thinking about. I wouldn't really stress much about the tools overall, but just know that they are available to you if you want them. But I wouldn't do a whole lot with them. I personally don't use them at all. I just use my scratch paper on the side. You will get a pen, you will get a stylus, and I believe they will even let you bring pencils. So that's nice to have. Now for games, what do you do? I say you use the scratch paper to draw your rules, your main diagram, and your individual question diagrams to the side. Even on one page, I could do all the work for a game and still have some room remaining. So be organized, be neat, be consistent in your diagramming. As for how to deal with the limitation that you can only see one question at a time, versus in the past, you could see a whole 2-page spread of logical reasoning questions or an entire game or an entire passage at once. What do? I suggest making a cutout and then covering a particular question. This is a question from the Juno 7 LSAT. You can cut out and see, limit your field of vision to only that one question at a time. Now, like I said, you cannot draw over here like you might be able to, or even draw on the stimulus like you might be able to on a paper version of the LSAT. So my recommendation is that you get used to treating your books like they were a screen, like they were PDFs. And you don't do any drawing on the screen or on the PDF. You do all your work on your scratch paper on the side and limit it to that and nothing more. Now, for those of you taking the LSAT in June or July, test day prep in particular is something that you should be thinking about. So I will share with you in the chat a link to my test day playlist, specifically on YouTube, where you can see all my videos on all the details of how to prep for the LSAT, what to bring, what not to bring, what to do in the final days leading up, what to do on the day of itself. And for those of you who are retaking, I recently taught a class on retake prep in particular. So I will share that link with you in the chat as well if you want to see what to do there. The biggest recommendation is think about what you'll do differently the next time around. Now, for those of you taking in July, you do have about a 2-month gap before the September LSAT. But for those of you taking the LSAT in September, your gap between September and October is only 1 month. LSAC has recently gone from offering it only 4 times a year to now offering it as many as 9 or 10 times a year. So the resulting change means that the gap between test dates is not as big as it used to be, meaning that retaking is easier than ever before. You only have to stay fresh on the LSAT for another 4 weeks or so for most test administrations. And that means simply taking 4 more full-length timed exams, maybe 1 a week over the 4 weeks between September and October, or between October and November. Then the gap from November to January is a bit more, from January to March is a bit more, but then March and April, again, only a month. So I recommend, I'd say for that reason, if you are taking September, consider one of the other 2. The reason why is that law schools do not average multiple LSAT scores. They only take the highest score. So for that reason, you could do better than previously with nothing more than blind luck. There is a margin of error or a score band of 3.5 points on either end, meaning that you could take it in July, let's say you could take it in July and get a 165, then take it in September and get a 168 or a 169. And you take it in September, get a 168, 169, you study a bit more, you improve a bit more. You could then, through luck, do 3 points better and get, let's say, a 171 or 172. Really nice, and nothing more than just a little bit of luck, a little bit more studying makes a big difference. And obviously, a 171 opens far more doors than a 168 does, and a 168 opens far more doors than a 165 does. And that extra few points could lead you to get into a school you might not have otherwise gotten into, or could lead you to get significantly more in the way of scholarship money. So I strongly recommend retaking if you think you could do even just a point or two better, if you have the time to stay fresh over that period, whatever that gap is, whether it's 1 month or 2 months, whatever it may be. Now, as for how to study for digital in particular, I've said a lot. One thing I didn't say is how it's administered specifically. It will be on a tablet, a Microsoft Surface Go tablet specifically. It'll be a 10-inch screen, and they'll give you a stylus. So I recommend practicing on a stylus, on a tablet, if you can, with a stylus. The digital LSAT site, like I said, like I showed you, it has 3 exams right now, 71, 73, and 74. They will be adding more in the lead up to the fall. So I recommend, if you can, get a tablet or borrow a tablet. If you currently have a tablet, use that. You could use a Samsung or an iPad or anything else. Doesn't really matter which one. I recommend trying to have it be close to 10 inches if possible. There is a tablet that's pretty cheap. It's the Amazon Fire tablet. That's about $150. And I've heard Amazon has a pretty good return policy. So if you don't like the tablet after the LSAT, you could probably return it if it's within that window. Specifically, I recommend, if you can, practicing reading dense text on a screen. There's this great website I love called phrasereader.com. What it lets you do is it lets you copy paste text into their text field, and then you, excuse me, and then you can display it to yourself at various speeds. So I will just go to a random article, put that in PhraseReader, and just parse. Once we parse, we can see that it displays it at 425 words per minute. So we can see that it's giving us that text at a fairly rapid speed. But if we want to, we could slow that down to 225 words per minute instead. And as a result, it will display that text to us at a slower speed. Pretty cool. So let's say if you're comfortable with 225 words per minute, you start with that, then you up it a little bit to 250 or 275 and continue displaying it at a faster speed. If you have the PDFs, you could actually copy paste the text from a reading comp passage or logical reasoning question into PhraseReader, and then it'll display it to yourself at that particular speed to get used to reading faster and faster in general, which is nice to do. And then also you're able to read faster on the screen itself, which is really important. We're used to reading listicles and BuzzFeed articles and Facebook posts and stuff like that, which is pretty typically low quality content on average. But reading articles from The Economist or Scientific American, or even LSAT prep test questions themselves, is great to be able to do. There's also this other site, Spreeder.com, which is more of an app, is a little bit fancier, has some other features. So it's nice to be able to practice with that as well. They even give you some books and articles and things like that. They have Dale Carnegie. You can also go to Project Gutenberg and take public domain texts like Pride and Prejudice or 1984 and put those into PhraseReader or Spreeder and read something interesting for yourself on there. Somebody asked, how do you know if the LSAT is going to be online in September? And how do you know if you're signed up for it? Great question. So the LSAT will definitely be digital in September. It will be fully on the tablet format. And so if you register for it on lsac.org, you will be signed up for the digital format in September. If you're taking July, though, it will be either paper and pencil format or digital format on the tablet. LSAC chooses for you, and you will not know in advance. You will not know until you walk into the test center. Somebody made a very good point here that abroad, September will be paper. That is correct. I'm speaking specifically to the North American audience here. When I talk about the LSAT policy changes, US and Canada, you're going through the transition. Overseas, it is still paper. That transition may happen in a couple of years. We don't know, but I'm speaking specifically to those who are in North America who are getting the digital format in September. Now, question, best way to study, is it on a tablet? Yeah, I think if you're doing full-length timed exams, it is ideal to use a tablet because that will best mimic the LSAT test day experience. Like I said, you can use the Microsoft Surface Go, but you could also use a Samsung or an iPad or the Amazon Fire that I mentioned. Those are a bit more affordable, I believe, or at least Amazon Fire is more affordable at $150. And that's the best way to use LSAC's familiarization tool at familiar.lsac.org. that has all the features, like I mentioned, the highlighting, underlining, the flagging questions. On computer, it's decent and has most of those features, but on smartphone, it doesn't really have a lot of them. It's kind of wonky on there. Wouldn't recommend it. But as for whether that means you should not buy an LSAT book, or should you, I think you should still, in fact, buy LSAT books. Only 3 exams at the moment are available in the digital format on LSAT's site. And you should certainly do far more than 3 LSATs before test day. So I'd recommend getting those books of LSAT exams. They're about $20 each on Amazon. They're in books of 10, tests 72 to 81, 42 to 51, 62 to 71, and so on. And they are all about $20 each or so, even a little bit less. So well worth the investment. Don't limit yourself to only what's available on LSAT's site. If you have the PDFs and you're studying for the fall, then certainly using them on screen is fine. But I'd say it is worth probably printing some out so you can study more easily on the go, on your commute. Let's say if you're taking the subway, for example, or if you want to study in environments where your computer or tablet is not accessible to you. So I do recommend getting these books of LSATs and then using the PDFs as well if you can to practice on the screen with your scratch paper on the side. Definitely still use books. Don't use only what's available online. A combination of books and digital, yes, I think that's a good idea. So using the digital on LSAT's site, using the PDFs, plus using prep books is a good way to go. I think a mix of the two is probably going to be ideal for anyone taking the digital LSAT or prepping as if they might be. I could talk a little bit now about study schedules. So this is my site, LSAT blog. I've got study schedules. They're one of my most popular things on the site. I have various study schedules for all different time periods from 1 month through 7 months, plus a retake schedule as well. As for how to prep, I recommend a few different phases of prep where you basically are doing a combination of untimed work and timed work. Specifically, I recommend what I call the laser approach, and I'll type that in the chat, laser. Laser is learning, basically using textbooks, learning the basics, just kind of reading material on different sections, different question types. So that's learning is the first part. Next is accuracy, where you're doing individual questions, untimed, perhaps by type, to give yourself a chance to get the questions right. Just accuracy, untimed, as long as it takes, whatever it is, focus on that, untimed. Next is individual timed sections. Timed 35 minutes, unless you have accommodations, in which case it might be 53 minutes or 70 minutes, depending. But for most people, 35 minutes, individual timed sections, strictly timed to focus on your pacing. Next is endurance, full-length, 5-section timed exams. That is incredibly important and is often overlooked. So 5 sections, not 4. Those books of LSATs I showed you, they only contain 4 sections because they're not going to publish the experimental section. They're saving that for a future LSAT test date. They're not giving it to you in the published form. So what you want to do instead is simulate it on your own. So let's say you're doing exams 83, 84, 85, and 86 as full-length timed exams. You could take sections from exam 82 and divide that exam into 4 parts and splice in each one of those 4 parts into exams 83, 84, 85, and 86. Then later, tally your results for 82 to see what it might have been had you taken it as a full-length timed exam separately. But endurance, often overlooked, incredibly important. So we've got learning, building the foundation, accuracy, untimed question work individually, sections, individual timed 35-minute sections, then endurance, full-length 5-section timed exams. Finally is R4, review. Review is after you do the exams, whether they're sections or full-length timed exams, doesn't matter. Review in excruciating detail everything you got wrong and everything you had difficulty with. You might want to rate your confidence level as you work through sections. Rate your confidence on what you're choosing for each question on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being you had no clue and you were guessing altogether, 10 being you were super confident, you would bet your life on it. The only thing I would say is don't allow yourself to choose the number 7, because 7 is a cop-out where you're saying, I was pretty good, but not that confident, but kind of in between. That's a so-so wishy-washy answer. No 7s, either 6, you were kind of guessing and unsure, or 8, you were fairly confident. But you rate your confidence on your first go through timed, Then your second go through, perhaps untimed, so you can see, was timing the issue, was understanding the issue, were you just guessing and getting lucky or guessing and getting unlucky? It's worth figuring that out. Then afterwards, I would suggest that you articulate your review process, what you were thinking in the moment. It was, if your misunderstanding was in the stimulus or the question stem or the choices. If it was the stimulus, maybe you didn't fully understand the method of reasoning. Maybe you didn't know what was evidence, what was conclusion. If it was the question stem, maybe you had trouble identifying the question stem type because they can sometimes use unfamiliar wording. So get a handle on that. If it was in the answer choices, what was tempting about the wrong answer that made you pick it and what ultimately makes it wrong? And what was discouraging about the right answer choice that pushed you away from it and what ultimately makes it correct? You want to do that again and again and again until you can see the patterns in your mistakes, whether it's reading the stimulus too quickly and not slowing down and taking the time to thoroughly understand it, or unfamiliar question stem wording, or the answer choices. I find that oftentimes it's either the answer choices where there's traps of encouragement towards the wrong answer and traps of discouragement away from the right answer, or people just read the stimulus too quickly. A lot of times you read the stimulus and you say, that was confusing, I don't really get it. You skip ahead to the answer choices hoping they will clear it up for you. But in fact, they only further confuse you and complicate things because the answer choices only make sense in the context of the stimulus. If you don't get the stimulus, the answer choices won't make a whole lot of sense. They probably won't lead you in the right direction. So it's worth taking the time to slow down and read the stimulus thoroughly. What's evidence? What's conclusion? Look for your indicator words. Evaluate the reasoning for yourself first. Potentially pre-phrase, if you can, depending on the question type. Then go on to the answer choices. Somebody mentioned when you're reading the answer choices, when the question says accept, remember that they put accept in capitals for a reason. I appreciate that. It's super important to think about. A lot of times people will forget halfway through that it's an accept question, not a regular one. So let's say if it's strengthen, accept, you're going through the choices. This strengthens, eliminate. This other one strengthens, eliminate. Then you get to see it and you're like, that strengthens, perfect. And you pick it and move on, when in fact, you eliminated the other ones because they strengthened. You should do the same for choice C, given that it's an accept question. So one thing I would recommend is, at least on the paper version, write down a little S next to each choice that does strengthen it as you eliminate it so that you don't forget halfway through. And then maybe you want to do something similar and simulate that on the scratch paper to the side. I think it would be useful to do just so you don't forget as you're working through it. Now, as for a study plan, I talked about laser, learning, accuracy, sections, exams, and review. But how do you mix in games, reasoning, and reading comp into that? I would suggest working section by section, having a focus on each one as you study. So let's say you want to start with games. Do some learning on games, read some textbooks, watch some videos, then do some practice problems of each game type. Maybe ordering games, then grouping games, then combination games. Building the foundation first, doing them untimed. Once you have a decent foundation untimed, then introduce timing into games as you work on logical reasoning untimed. Continue on logical reasoning untimed, doing games timed, then level up. Next, you do logical reasoning timed and games timed, then do reading comp untimed as you continue on the other sections, then do a mix of all three timed, then full length sections, then review. But as you're doing this, also note what are your weak areas. Focus on those to the side. Maybe if you have trouble with flaw questions or grouping games or science passages, add in some additional practice doing those on the side by type, maybe untimed, maybe timed. People always ask, what should I do? Questions by type to drill, or time sections, or review the basics. It's all good. It depends on what you need in the moment, and probably doing a mix of all three is worthwhile because you don't want to get fatigued. You don't want to burn out. And doing too much of the same thing over and over is a recipe for burnout. I was working with a student earlier today who doesn't like science passages. And she was saying, should I do nothing but tough science passages in a row? And I would say, that would probably make you miserable and burn you out. Don't do it. Maybe you want to mix in a greater proportion of science passages relative to humanities passages or law passages. But doing 20 science passages in a row is just a recipe for misery. Why do that to yourself? You're not going to be doing 20 science passages in a row on test day. You'll only be doing one science passage on test day. So maybe do a handful, maybe do half science passages, and then a third of each of the other passage types, humanities, social science, and law. But don't burn yourself out. It's not worth it. There's not a whole lot of benefit to doing that. Do a mix of things, constantly change it up on yourself so that you're not avoiding studying altogether. As for your study schedule, take days off. I build in days off into my study plans for a reason. So if you don't plan to take any days off and you want to work 10 hours a day, 7 days a week, then please do not buy my schedules, because it's not what I recommend, and you're only going to end up hurting yourself. And if you're not going to follow the schedule at all, then just don't bother getting it. Do your own thing, but don't come back crying to me later when you turned out that you burned yourself out and you need to retake it in the future. Do things the right way now. I have Lsat Diaries on my site where I actually have students sharing their study journeys, and I will share that with you now so you can see what I'm talking about. Basically, I had a bunch of students write in guest posts where they share their experiences. So I have compilations of them. I also have someone who scored a 180. I have someone who went from 167 to 179, someone who went from 155 to 176, someone who went from 158 to 172, and everything in between. And all the way down the line too, I have people who scored in the 140s and went to the 160s. You see here, I have a handful of those, 143 to 155, 128 to 148, 142 to 157 to 161, all across the spectrum. And these people, they're sharing their journeys and their mistakes so that you don't have to make the same mistakes they did. And I'm, of course, doing the same thing on my end as well. So I've been through the process myself. I started off at a 152. I ended up getting a 175 on test day. It took me an entire year and a lot of misery to do it, but I made it there in the end. And so I did a lot of that the wrong way, of course, because nobody should be studying for an entire year for this. I think that 5 or 6 months is more than enough. But 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 months, it probably shouldn't take you that long, I hope. But the way to do that is prep tests and review, and that laser process I recommended: learning, accuracy, sections, endurance, and review. That's the process you should follow. And it's a marathon, not a sprint. There are currently 86 numbered exams and a handful of unnumbered ones. Do you have to do all of them? No. Do you have to study 7 days a week? No. Should you study 10 hours a day? No. Even just the most recent 20, 30 exams is more than enough for you if you review them in sufficient detail. So for those of you taking the LSAT in July or September, maybe you want to focus on exams 52 and up, 52 to present, and that would be more than enough. Maybe you want to use exams 52 to 61 to learn the basics, then 62 to 71 as individual sections, and 72 to 86 as full-length 5-section timed exams to build your endurance. And that takes 3 months or more. I think you can't do this in 1 to 3 months. It's not enough time. 3 months is the bare minimum that I would recommend, and ideally 5 or 6 months at least to reach your fullest potential, especially if you're working or you're in school or interning. I had a student recently talking to me about how she was doing 2 internships this summer. One of them was 3 days a week. The other one was basically on her own time, at her own pace, asynchronous, whenever she had the time. And it was on the First Amendment. Super interesting, right? First Amendment legal research with a professor. Sounds like a lot of fun. But if you're interning 3 days a week and you're doing this other side research project that's super interesting to you, and you could say, well, I'll make the LSAT my top priority and these other internships will be priorities number 2 and 3. I would say that's a huge mistake, because First Amendment research, legal research, probably way more interesting to you than doing LSAT prep. And so priorities 2 and 3, in my opinion, should be your avoid at all costs list. That's where they should be. Avoid them at all costs. The internship, 3 days a week, that's fine. If it's a 9 to 5, you do that 9 to 5, those 3 days, but then the other 4 days of the week, that's when you study the LSAT. This First Amendment legal research on your own time, avoid at all costs. I told that student to basically cancel that internship if she could, because it's way too tempting to focus on that. And 2 internships plus LSAT studying, how much studying will you really get done? Maybe 10, 15 hours a week. That's okay if you're taking the LSAT in October or November, and maybe even September too. But this student was taking it in July, only 6, 7 weeks away. 10, 15 hours a week, that ends up being what, 60 hours, 80 hours, 90 hours, not really enough time to reach your fullest potential, in my opinion. Of course, a lot depends on your goals and what you want out of this, but your LSAT score is the biggest ROI you'll get in studying that you could possibly get in life, I think, honestly. Negotiating scholarships and LSAT scores will be the biggest bang for your buck, because even just a point or two more on the LSAT could lead to thousands of dollars in scholarship money or getting into a better law school. So time invested on the LSAT is really a no-brainer. As for internships, law schools don't care that much. It's LSAT score, then GPA, then everything else. And what is everything else? Everything else is your internships, your work experience, your volunteer work, your letters of recommendation, personal statement, addenda, optional essays, character and fitness statements, and so on. But it's really kind of like LSAT's 50%, GPA's 20 or 30%, and the soft factors are everything else. Obviously, the numbers will vary from school to school. These are not scientific. This is kind of more theoretical, but this is how it works. You can look at LSAT's Gpa Calculator and actually input different LSAT scores to see what your chances are like at various schools. And I'll share that with you now if you want to see that. It's kind of fun to play around with a little bit. And of course, so much is theoretical until you have your LSAT score. But you probably have your undergraduate GPA pretty much fixed at this point. If you're prepping for the LSAT, if you're a junior or a senior, the GPA you're applying with is probably pretty much set in stone or close to it. But let's say you had a 3.2 and a 165. What would happen for you then? They have all these caveats here. Continue to search results. You can see, and they've ranked it, let's see, kind of like by alphabetical order, which is probably not the most useful for us. Let's say likelihood, low to high. All right, so a lot of these schools, you see Cornell, probably not getting in. Columbia, a lot of the top 14 are pretty low chances because 3.2 is not that great. 165 is a lot lower than it could be. But if we go down a bit, we see that Minnesota, decent chances. Fordham, decent chances. UC Irvine, pretty decent. Emory, 25% chance. Not so bad, not so great. But you see that numbers do matter. They matter quite a bit. And these numbers are based on the scores of admitted students, the fall 2017 full-time entering class. So the numbers are real. The numbers don't lie. So the best thing you can do right now for yourself is get a high LSAT score because, of course, your GPA is fairly fixed. And, of course, let's say you try really hard fall semester senior year. Wonderful. But how much of a dent will that really make if there are, 8 semesters in college overall? One semester is only a drop in the bucket. Yes, it's your most recent, and an upward trend is always nice, but it's not going to be earth-shattering for you in terms of its impact. But if, let's say, instead of a 165, you got a 170, how does that change things? We put it in now. What's the impact? Suddenly, Texas is now above 25% likelihood. Michigan is now 25%-ish. And Emory is now 50% and above. BU is above 50%. So your odds improve significantly with just 5 more points on the LSAT with no change in your GPA. Big impact from a few points more. After taking it in the fall, you honestly have, 4 months? That's enough time, at least that's enough time to make pretty much anything happen. So I strongly recommend putting in the time. Got a question here in the chat. Let's see, what was it? Should you take the LSAT in September or October or November if you're starting in June to study? So if you're starting in June, you've got about 3.5 months till the September LSAT and 4.5 till October and so on. I'd say, yeah, start studying now. Aim for September. That gives you a good amount of time, but then also consider October and November as well. And if you can, register for those as well if you can afford it, because you can always withdraw later. And there is a certain security in having that test registration lined up. This way, you don't feel like you have it all riding on any one particular test date, which is important because, of course, while the LSAT in general is extremely important, no one particular test date will make or break you. And so having the peace of mind and the security knowing that October is available if you need it, November is available if you need it, and through nothing more than luck alone, even if you did not improve your understanding of the LSAT at all, you could do 3 to 4 points better, could make a massive impact in your score, in your results, and your admissions chances. And of course, if you don't do better, no big deal. Law schools only consider the highest score. So there really is no downside to retaking except another $200 for your test registration and having another take on record. But a few points better is worth having another take on record because law schools submit only the highest score to the American Bar Association. And that's what's considered for the US News rankings, which all law schools care a great deal about. It's what a lot of the admission officers' jobs rest on is how do they do better in the rankings? They do better in the rankings by admitting students and matriculating students with higher LSAT scores and higher GPAs. And they will throw money at you if you have a higher score than their median in order to woo you to their school. So how much should you study? As much as you can without burning out. Probably, I would say, let's say 5-6 hours a day, 5 days a week. That becomes 25-30 hours a week. That's pretty good. I don't think you need to do more than that. If you do more, you run the risk of burning out. So 20-25 hours a week, maybe 30, but no more than that with frequent breaks. So if you, let's say hypothetically, you are in the fortunate position to be able to study for the LSAT full time, you're not working, you're not in school, you got somebody supporting you or have some savings, which is a lucky position to be in. So that's great. I would say wake up early, study from 9 a.m. till 12 p.m., take a 1 hour break for lunch, study from 1 to 4 p.m., and that's it. You're good for the day. You wake up early, maybe 7, 8 a.m., you work out, you eat breakfast, whatever you like to do, you meditate, you go for a walk in the park. 9 a.m., you hit the books, lunch, take a short break for lunch, go walk in the park, whatever you like. 4 p.m., you're done. You're good. You can go see friends, relax, watch TV, exercise if you don't like to exercise in the morning, wherever, run errands, whatever you like to do it then. And within your 3-hour study chunks, of course, take breaks. Taking breaks is important. You don't want to burn out. There's a great app called Focus, the Focus app for smartphones and tablets and such. It basically implements what's called the Pomodoro technique, where you study in cycles, where you study for 25 minutes, take a 5-minute break, then hit the books again, 25 minutes, 5-minute break, back to it, and then longer breaks sprinkled in throughout. It's a great way to stay focused and avoid distractions because you do not check your phone, you do not check the internet or Facebook or whatever during your 25-minute study period. You save it for the 5-minute break later that you know is coming up. So rather than taking breaks whenever you feel like it or whenever you feel fatigued, and then a 5-minute break becomes 20 minutes or 30 minutes, you can instead limit your breaks and know that they're coming up soon. Definitely recommend Focus app, Pomodoro technique, highly useful to stay focused and know that you do have a break coming up down the line in the future. All right, well, I will share a little bit of what I have going on my end in terms of next steps, studying for the future, what to do over the next few months and how I can help. For those of you who don't know me, again, my name is Steve Schwartz. I run the LSAT blog. I also host the LSAT Unplugged YouTube channel and podcast. This is the YouTube channel, youtube.com/LSAT blog. I've got playlists on logic games, logical reasoning, reading comprehension, test day prep, retake prep. I have recordings of my classes here in New York City. I have a playlist on digital LSAT prep in particular, book reviews, review strategies, conversations with former admission officers, current admission officers, a former LSAT question writer, coaching sessions with actual students live. I have online classes like this one. I have Q&A sessions, and then I have logic games explanations for the vast majority of games ever released, Juno 7, 70s, 60s, 50s, 40s, 30s. I'm a little bit behind, but I will catch up at some point. I'll put the link to the YouTube channel in the chat if you want to see what that's all about. It's youtube.com/LSAT blog. Somebody asked, what's the best book to buy on Amazon? I would say it's probably the LSAT prep tests that are in books of 10 for about $20 each. And they're the best resource you can possibly get, just actual LSAT questions. And I have on my website, I have explanations for them. So in terms of books, I do have a lot of other books available to you that I will share with you here. And I'll share the link also. So in terms of books, and I'll share the link with you here, I have study schedules, guides, cheat sheets, checklists, vocabulary builder, explanations, and then individual books on games, reasoning, reading comp as well. So lots of resources for you there. And those are digital downloads immediate. For Amazon, I go to Amazon for the prep tests though, unless you have access to the PDFs elsewhere. Somebody asked about literary criticism passages. Any place to familiarize yourself with that topic? Yes, there's a website called aldaily.com, and it's Arts and Letters Daily. That's a great source for literary criticism if you want things like critical theory, subjectivism, philosophy, things of that nature. Great resource for that. Let's see what else. I've got courses. I have full video courses for every section, as well as live online classes. So my courses are not just recorded videos where you never get to talk to anybody and answer questions. They're a mix of video courses, learning the basics, the fundamentals on games, reasoning, and reading comp. They also cover test day prep and retaking. I have live master classes as part of the course packages. So if you want to have classes like this with me where I actually walk through LSAT problems, that's a great place to go. They are not $1,000 or $1,500 like the big prep companies. They are monthly on demand, pay as you go, which makes them much more affordable. So if you're taking the LSAT soon, they'll be a lot cheaper than taking a $1,500 prep course. So that's another thing available to you. I have tons of free stuff too. I'm not only pushing the paid stuff here. I have free stuff on games, reasoning, reading comp, schedules, test day prep, the diaries, categorizations, admissions. And so yeah, you could see if I click on games, for example, I have tons of articles on logic games in particular. I have written explanations. I have my own logic games that I've written from scratch. There are no mistakes in these games. I guarantee you I'm offering a $1,000 reward for anyone who finds an error in one of my logic games here. They're of all different game types, ordering and grouping. Pretty useful there. And then of course I have links to the books as well. So tons of stuff there. What else? What else can I share with you? I have a podcast. It's LSAT Unplugged. You can find it on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, and pretty much everywhere else. I release new episodes every single day. They are mostly pretty short, just a couple minutes. I don't want to waste your time. They're just covering quick summaries of different question types, for example. But I do have full class recordings as well. This one's a recording of a class I taught for CUNY students at Hunter. It's 18 minutes. I have, what else? A 26-minute coaching session. I have a 21-minute coaching interview. So lots of good stuff there. An interview with a UCLA admission officer, Dean Robert Schwartz. No relation to me, Steve Schwartz, just a coincidence, but he's a super nice guy. And so I have all sorts of discussions here and whatnot. A lot of the same stuff you'll find on the YouTube channel, but if you prefer to listen on the go, podcasts are a great way to do it. Pretty much everything I have to share with you right now. This was a lot of fun, and I appreciate all your great questions and insights that you share with me here. I'm happy to stick around and answer any other questions you may have. Just let me know. Anything else on LSAT prep, law school admissions, games, reasoning, or reading comp, anything that you wish I had covered but did not, I'm happy to go into some more detail on any of that stuff. Nothing else? All right, well, in that case, I want to thank you all for coming. It's been a lot of fun connecting with you here, and I hope to see you in the Facebook group. Feel free to email me at lsatunplugged@gmail.com. If you have any questions, I do read every single email I receive, and I will do my best to get back to you. And I hope to see you at an upcoming class, either in person here in New York or at a future online class. And please, again, visit the website, LSAT blog, the YouTube channel, the podcast. I'm putting out as many free resources as I possibly can. And I'm always happy to help however I can. I just love talking about this stuff, and I'm happy to address your questions if and when you ask them. So thanks for coming. Hope you enjoy the weekend, and keep in touch. All the best, everyone. Take care. Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I wish you all the best and take care.